Well, it turns out you guys really like the idea of snorkeling with Tetras. So this time we'll take a look at the takeaway for your aquarium. Hi everybody, John here with another Fincast, and today I want to follow up on the last report I did, my last Fincast if you will, where we talked with Mike Tuccinardi, who was down in the Rio Negro River in Brazil and had the opportunity to go snorkeling with tetras, cardinal tetras, and even some cichlids, some epistogrammas, and it was amazing to hear him talk about what it was like to go into that river and basically put that mask on, look down in the water and see essentially a whole aquarium full of fish right there in front of his eyes. And that's what it's like down there in the Rio Negro. So if you haven't seen part one yet, I encourage you to take a look at that, because it's been extremely popular in terms of the growth rate and views compared to a typical Fincast. So I'm appreciative of that. And last week, Mike talked about some of the things that you might expect that you would ask somebody who was snorkeling in a South American river, because let's face it, it's dangerous. So in that first Fincast, Snorkeling with Tetras, he talked about what it was like to get to this fishing village in a remote section of the Rio Negro. He talked about what it was like to be in water where there's anacondas that could eat you, and piranhas, and even caiman, which are alligator or crocodile type of reptiles. So he talked about all that. But the one thing that we discussed during that interview that I held back because I felt like it deserved its own topic was, what is the takeaway for our own aquariums? In other words, what he's looking at in the water, well, how does that translate to our fish tank? Mike has actually been experimenting with his own tanks at home. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. But essentially, he says our fish tanks are too clean. Now that might be a tough pill for some of us to swallow. So here's a look at my current tank. This is my big driftwood project, and my plants are they're pretty, they're growing pretty well, and I don't really trim them back maybe the way I could. I've seen a lot of aquascapes that are a whole lot prettier than mine, but the plants are growing and I'm happy, and I kind of have this feeling that the more places there are for the fish to hide, the happier the fish will be, and so forth and so on. So I don't keep my tanks absolutely beautiful, but I do keep them clean. I like that crystal clear water. I use ChemiPure and some other products to keep it super clean, and my fish are by and large very happy. But Mike would suggest that perhaps a clean fish tank like this, even with maybe some of the plants overgrowing, isn't exactly what the fish really want. So here's what Mike had to say about the way we keep our tanks. So what's the takeaway for aquarium keepers if they want to keep these fish successfully, or if they want to appreciate the fish more? I mean, what would be your thought?
Well, it's really interesting to see the environment the fish are in, and I definitely came away from the first time snorkeling there with a huge kind of epiphany that, I think my tanks are too clean. If you look at the video, there's just so much sediment, there's leaf litter, there's debris. All of that really adds to the environment, and they grow biofilm, which feeds the fish. They grow all manner of little critters that are natural sources of fish food. And so I started thinking that these freshwater tanks that we keep are so sterile. They're so one-dimensional. There's not really that aspect of it. So I started to use a lot of leaf litter in my own personal tanks. I use a lot of different botanicals and stuff like that you can put in the tank that grows. Number one, it releases tannins into the water, which is a good thing for the fish, but also tends to grow biofilms and just adds to the diversity of life in your aquarium.
So, and you had mentioned some places. Are there United States stores that are now selling this leaf litter? It always seemed like you had to go to Europe to get it.
Yeah, finally, I think it's taken off in the U.S., which is nice. A couple of the major suppliers or major manufacturers are now selling the Indian almond leaves. A lot of local fish stores have those. My shop down the road always carries those in stock. There's a really cool online seller, Tannins Aquatics, that specifically deals with blackwater aquariums and has all kinds of neat little seed pods and different types of leaves and things like that. So I use them a lot when I'm stocking my tanks and getting them set up.
And do you just put them in there? Do you have to soak the leaves to make them sink? How long before the biofilm develops? What would you say to somebody?
Yeah, usually it's a process. So I tend to, I'll get a bunch of leaves and seed pods, that sort of thing, and you have to boil them ideally for a while. So I'll give them a boil for a good hour or so, and then after that they usually sink. And yeah, there's definitely a process of them settling into the tank, so to speak, but I'm a pretty patient guy when it comes to my fish tank, so I don't mind it so much. If you really were nitpicky about the look of your tank, you could easily soak them in a bucket for a couple of weeks before you add them to the tank to skip some of the initial process there.
Yep. Huh.
But I like it. I think the natural aspect of it and just seeing the fish interact in it is really cool. If you see in the video, all these dwarf cichlids are living under and among the leaf litter, and in a typical aquarium, they just don't have anything like that to really give them cover and enrichment and to move around in. So it's a pretty cool way to keep fish similar to what you'd see in nature.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Of course, the driftwood and the roots and all of that, that all goes without saying, right?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So I just want to know from your perspective, I mean, what was it like the first time you got to put on that snorkel and go down and see what, you know, a lot of people who have aquariums would have liked to have seen?
Yeah, it was really something. Again, probably my first takeaway was, wow, this water is messy. There's just so much stuff in it. And I don't think that always shows through in the video, because in some of the areas with a lot of sediment, the video footage isn't good, and that gets edited out, of course, but there's just so much in the water, and that was really remarkable. But aside from that, I just seeing the way that groups of fish interact and behave in the wild was really, really amazing, because you don't always get to see that behavior in the aquarium. It's just a different environment. So seeing these mixed schools of tetras, all different species, just darting along together, seeing these groups of catfish cruising along through the leaf litter, the big groups of cichlids hunting together, sifting through the sand, that sort of thing. It's really impressive to see the complexity of that ecosystem, which even in the best aquarium is hard to really represent that.
So what do you think about that? Does the pleasure of your aquarium come from having something that's beautiful in the corner of whatever room it's in as a sort of an accent piece? Or does the happiness of the fish make a huge difference in your love and your takeaway and your experience with your aquarium? And if you could make the fish super happy and acting like they would in the wild, but you didn't have quite such a beautiful fish tank, would that be more or less enjoyable to you? Would that be something that you would consider? And Mike suggests that, you know, and if you really like the fish, that what you want is you want to see those fish behaving naturally. So maybe you do have some leaf litter on the bottom, and maybe your water's not crystal clear. Maybe it's tea stained. So I was pleasantly surprised right after I did the interview with Mike to get my email update from Amazonas Magazine to see that Mike had actually written a blog about this. And he talked a lot about the activities that with his fish, even beyond what we went into with my interview with him. And I will actually put a link to that. But he talked about plecos that are always hiding during the daytime and only coming out at night, being very active during the day, and some other species, and just a complete change in the behaviors of various fish, which I know is frustrating because we spend a lot of money, say, on a rare pleco or something, and then you never see it because it's always hidden underneath the log, and you're kind of, you know, looking down. It's like, okay, it's still in there. But his fish started acting a lot more quote unquote normal, and they were out during times of the day when the fish often aren't. So I think, you know, there's something to be said for that, and I really encourage you to take a look at his article. Again, I'll put that in the description with this video down below. The other thing that Mike and several other people have contacted me about is a place called Tannins Aquatics. I think I'm saying that right. But basically it's a company here in the United States which is now selling the leaves and so forth, which create this biotope to a certain extent. A lot of it's going to come from your driftwood and other things that you might do with your aquarium, current and so forth. But this is a step in the right direction, and I've read quite a lot about Europeans doing this, but it seems like it's something that's just coming into the American market. So I'll also put a link in there as well, and honestly may contact these folks. The last thing my wife wants is for me to set up another aquarium in the house, but I'm kind of wanting to tinker with this, and so it's really kind of captivated my imagination. So you may be seeing me, I'm not, no promises, but you may be seeing me set up another fish tank, and maybe we can kind of follow along with the process, and maybe I can even get Mike to contribute some thoughts on how to really set that tank up properly, and then we can do a nice how-to video here on Fincasters. So that's something that's out there down the road. A couple other hurdles to cross before that. But anyway, so there it is. Question for you is, if you leave it in the comments down below, would you like to see a tank that was less clean if the fish were happier? Would you get enjoyment from that? Is the true answer somewhere in the middle? How dirty would you allow your fish tank to be if your fish were completely happy? Just some thoughts out there, and I would appreciate your comments. In the meantime, I'll say thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next Fincast.